Okay, so today we're going to be talking about chapter 23 on the American pageant, and it will be about the political paralysis and the Gilded Age. Just a quick overview on the chapter is in 1870, a census, which is like an official count or survey of a population, reported over 39 million people due to a large wave of immigrants. And idealist Americans also hope for the birth of a new freedom, which was basically promised by Abraham Lincoln after the Civil War. But however, this age was filled with corruption and political stalemate instead. And another quick little note, by 1890, the country had 4,000 millionaires in which they held 20% of the country's wealth. Republicans and Democrats, both parties had their own way of campaigning. However, the most memorable campaign was the Bloody Shirt campaign, which basically reminded the Democrats about the emotional calls to avenge the blood of soldiers that died in the Civil War. And they also favored personal morality and a strong federal government. The Democrats, however, mostly consisted of immigrants and Lutheran Catholics, and they favored toleration and no moral standard, which was imposed by the government.
Okay, next up we have scandals and corrupt politics, and two remarkable ones of the Gilded Age were the Credit Mobilier scandal and the Tweed Ring scandal. And the Credit Mobilier scandal happened in 1872, and basically railroad people, they would make this huge credit mobilier company, they would invest in all these railroads, and then they would lie about how much money the railroads were worth. So when other investors would come in and buy the railroads, they would kind of dip away with no consequences and all the profits. And this was just a really bad scandal that was unfortunately very common, especially in the railroad company. And then Tweed Ring, so basically William Boss Tweed was a big New York political figure, and he employed a lot of people, bigwig financial men in New York City to embezzle a lot of money, and this just showed corruption in business and in politics. So then we have the birth of Jim Crow in the post-Reconstruction South, and this was sharecropping, tenant farming, and the Jim Crow laws, and these were all made to oppress Black people, and they made separate but equal facilities that were basically segregation and just recreated the system of oppressing Black people in the South. And then they also had literacy requirements for voting, and there were registration laws and poll taxes to prevent Southern Blacks from voting. And then there were a lot of ethnic clashes marked by large amounts of immigration and the Chinese Exclusion Act, which is when a lot of people from China came to the West Coast to find gold, and people did not like that they were stealing jobs, so that the Supreme Court then ruled that they were not allowed to do that anymore, and they excluded Chinese people from immigrating here. And then also, after troops were taken from Louisiana and the South Carolina, African Americans were racially targeted in the South, and the Supreme Court ruled that the 14th Amendment was unconstitutional, basically allowing for racism.
For the election of 1880, the Republicans chose James Garfield to go against the Democratic candidate Winfield Scott. James Garfield won the presidency, and this led to reforms in the spoils system and the Pendleton Act of 1883, which established the Civil Service Commission, allowing people federal jobs on the basis of merit and not by connections. The election of 1884, which is Cleveland's presidency, Cleveland wins the election as the Democratic candidate, and in turn lowers the tariffs in 1887. And then the campaign of the entire presidency was very, very corrupt, with civil service reforms and political scandals all throughout it. And then the election of 1888 was with Harrison, and the Harrison as the Republican candidate won. And there was actually $1 billion Congress at the time, which is the first time that Congress reached $1 billion valuation. And in return, he passed a bunch of bills which gave pensions to the Civil War veterans, increased government purchases on silver, and then also passed the McKinley Tariff Act of 1890. He raised tariffs, which hurt farmers financially, and then led to all of the Republicans losing support and falling short in the congressional elections, giving the advantage to the Democrats.
The Populists. So the Populist Party was created in 1891, and it was formed by frustrated farmers in the West and South. They nominated General Weaver for the election of 1892, but didn't win because he supported Black voting rights, which lost them the majority of the South. Cleveland in the Depression. So Grover Cleveland ran for president in 1892 and beat the Populists and the Republican parties. The Panic of 1893 was the worst economic downturn in the 1800s, caused by overbuilding, overspeculation, and agricultural depression. The Sherman Silver Purchase Act was passed by Benjamin Harrison and forced the government to buy a specific amount of silver every month, and this caused inflation and the silver production to go up, resulting in people trading in silver for gold.